anybody who has read The Golden Suicides in Vanity Fair magazine, The Unbreakable Miss Lovely, um, the Gawker article, Why I Left Scientology, will recognize the extensive network of stalking, psychological warfare, sabotage, and staged fiascos that I'm describing in the context of our technologically advanced society, which, in contrast to when Paulette Cooper was getting fair gamed, now has the added leverage of smartphones and very powerful spyware that can be purchased at a very high price. Companies like Black Cube and Kroll that became public knowledge largely, at least from my learning trajectory, when Ronan Farrow published the series on Harvey Weinstein's Army of Spies. And I would say with the Church of Scientology, it's even more so because they're spending way more money on it and they're way more obsessive about it. And the stuff that happens to me, that I'm describing, they could be purchasing like a bulk list of people to monitor through companies like Black Cube and Kroll. Sorry, I want to make sure those names are clearly articulated. They could be also, in New York City, they could be enlisting mafia and gangs. They could be enlisting private sole proprietors who are willing to do way more illegal stuff than companies like Black Cube and Kroll, who are established enough where the things that they're doing are a violation of civil rights, but they're somehow navigating the extent of the legal requirements that they're still bound by. But they could probably hire some solo entrepreneur who used to be, the Iceman for the Genovese family or whatever, and now just works, for himself as a freelance operative, especially in New York City. So it's almost they can probably they could hire ex-KGB sole proprietors. They could hire ex-gang members or current gang members or current KGB who have a day off and they want to work, some extra gigs for the Church of Scientology. So in New York City, anything is possible. They could hire some expert assassin to dress up as a random homeless person on the train and have them go crazy and push me onto the tracks as the train is coming, and then run away and change outfits really quickly in the woods, and they'll be like, oh, Joyce died just because some random crazy person pushed her onto the tracks. We never know what happened to the person who did it. They're probably just off in the world, going crazy somewhere, and it's probably an expert, whatever CIA operative who lost their job for being unethical and now they just work for the Church of Scientology or something. I don't know. I feel like something like that could happen. So at the same time, the stuff I'm describing to me seems sometimes I'm how did the Church of Scientology get that far embedded in this specific company or this specific organization? Where I'm is this just the Church of Scientology? Are they that deeply embedded in so many wide sectors of society? Or am I an MK Ultra experiment and they're using the the Church of Scientology fair game policy as like an umbrella to kind of do weird experiments on me and like just have us all assume that it's just Scientology. Yeah, like what are, and if they are doing weird experiments on me, what are the experiments on? Are they on fascism? Are they on totalitarianism? Are they on human behavior? Are they on misinformation? Are they on the different factors that might encourage people to like so readily participate in this black ops against me? And is it on the ability to manipulate like large groups of people to scapegoat someone, and what might lead one person to be a more like likely scapegoat than another? I'm not sure. You know, but if someone's not writing about the factors of human behavior in this, you know, fair gaming that's going against me, I certainly would like to. You know, now that this is happening, it may as well lead somewhere useful. But I want to share one story of many that illustrates the strangeness and extent of internet manipulation that's happening to me, that I don't know how it works, but I can observe certain things that indicate there's some kind of powerful, weird tech stuff in place. Like, I don't know if they're using, like, whatever, Pegasus, that government program that, like, governments use to literally track journalists in their smartphone. I don't know. So, and I'm not saying everyone the government, you know, tracks with these programs is like an innocent person, like they may be a huge threat who's planning to do something terrible. But at this point, like, people with enough money seem to be able to buy these programs and just use it to harass whoever they feel shouldn't have the right to say something unflattering about them in a book or something. But this thing that happened to me, the story of the weird, like, scammy agent who contacted me while referencing, like, privately shared information that I'd sent to another agent in an email in a way that was, like, meant to be just enough of an echo where I knew they were, like, able to somehow access another unrelated email I'd written, but, like, not enough for me to make any claims that this was some weird thing going on. So, I'll have to workshop that title. So, in the summer of okay. This would have been the summer of, I'm trying to remember if it was 2021 or 2022. So, it would have been the summer of 1 second. Okay, yeah, it was the summer of 2021, and it was in August, I believe, and I was being staffed through a catering company at NYU, where I had attended school for acting, and I was in the cafeteria directing students to social distance while they got food. And in my day planner on that day, I had written, get $300,000 book deal. You know, it's like a mildly culty manifestation thing I write, whatever, do from time to time. Like, we all have those things, right? It's harmless. Like, don't make fun of me. Plenty of successful people do lots of crazy shit like that. Okay. So, I'm doing that just to keep my spirits up. And right as I am sitting and ready to start my shift, I get a phone call, and I don't pick it up, but it is on the caller ID the name of an agent I'd queried earlier that week. I'd been querying my dark humor memoir, like throughout 2021. I had gotten input from, a reader who is also a respected writer and published author of numerous books, who attended Iowa Writers Workshop and got MacArthur grants and stuff, and I was a beta reader for one of their books, and my book, at that point, that was when I got my book to the point of being realistically ready to get in the hands of an agent who would then probably do rewrites and then be able to sell that to a publisher, who would then perform legal vetting and stuff like that. So I was not deluded about my book's readiness at that point to work with an agent. I'm definitely new to the process and haven't worked with a literary agent, and not with a full book before, but I've done my due diligence at that point. And so I on the caller ID, it was the name Paul Levine, who was an agent that I'd queried earlier that week, and I tried to temper my emotions, but I did feel some excitement at seeing the name of an agent I'd queried days before. But of course, I'd also been getting fair gamed for more than 5 years at this point and known it. And so I was usually when a fair gamey thing happens, it's sometimes right as I'm starting a shift, because they're trying to disrupt just me being on time for basic work, for basic survival, right? So, I'm like, oh, how exciting. I'm like, oh, it's probably, what scam is this going to be next? What weird fair game thing is this? Um, and also, like, these private investigators and operatives, they have the power to spoof phone numbers and call from, like, their spy van that's parked down the street, and your caller ID will say, like, oh, Sylvester Stallone is calling me, you know what I mean? Um, and it can spoof a real number and then call you and pose as someone totally different. In fact, they can probably afford voice scramblers, and they can probably they can make a they can make a female voice sound like a man's voice, convincingly so, and vice versa. And they can, and they can even, there's even hacking equipment. I've seen this about online by, like, this woman who was honey trapped. Like, someone can call you on a video call and change their image. Like, they can, like, this one woman was honey trapped by a scam artist who pretended to be, like, this famous actor and called her on a video call, like, as the famous actor. So it's scary how much deep fake is possible. So I looked at my caller ID and I was like, Paul Levine, oh my god, I think it's that agent I contacted. But at the same time I was like, oh bummer, that specific agent was, like, the one agent that I felt sketchy about, and their website was kind of weird. Like, it was kind of messed up, and, like, I looked at some of their clients online, and, like, some of their clients, like, had these crazy tweets, and it was weird. Like, and it seemed like he published a lot of kind of new age, borderline culty books. And there was one person on his list who had actually won the L. Ron Hubbard Writers of the Future contest. And I, at this point, like, who knows if he is legit and his website's getting attacked because he said one bad thing about, like, the Writers of the Future contest, or if he's just, like, I don't know, like a hired fixer who just is positioned to sit there and pose as an agent to fuck with people who have, like, gotten on some powerful person's shit list. I don't know. But, like, I was like, oh yay, it's that agent. I was like, oh, it's that agent. And I don't know, but at that point I was, like, really hoping it would be something good. But Paul Levine, like, I kind of queried him just because he was on some list. It wasn't one that I was, like, really pumped up about. That same, week or cluster of days, I had also queried an agent that I was pumped up about, whose book first of all, I read one of their clients' books years ago when I was, like, figuring out how to write my dark humor memoir, and their client's book hugely was just, I was like, yeah, this book and my book makes sense if they were with the same agent. I was like, I feel like if this agent understands this book, they would definitely be into my book, and they're two totally different memoirs, but they are still very much, like, of the same metal for a number of reasons. And I was like, oh my god, like, I really like this book. I would love to work with the agent who works with this book. My book is totally different, and, like, whoever wants to read this book would probably be into reading my book too. And, like, and then so I was like, so I contacted this other agent, right? We'll call him Bill. And I found his website. Some agents, you have to email them a query. Other agents only have, like, a form on their website where you enter the info and click enter, and it sends to them through a form, maybe to avoid, like, hacked manuscripts or something. So I contacted Bill, the agent I wanted, with a query, and I was like, hi, usually I send like the same very like carefully planned query, but of course because I really wanted this agent, naturally I like deviated from form, which is always the stupid move, but I didn't say anything too crazy. All I did was I wrote like, oh, I'm willing to wager a David Mamet and like, or like I'm willing to pull a David Mamet and like wager like $5,000 that, you know, like my book will sell. Okay. Yes, that's a little douchey, but like there are so many stories about like all of these authors who have done really crazy things, stalked their agent to the bar where they knew they hung out and gave them their manuscript, like all kinds of stuff. And it's usually, guess what? It's usually like male authors. Okay. So me just saying, oh, I'm even, I'll pull a David Mamet and like bet you $5,000 that my book will sell, right? Because David Mamet apparently did that for like his very first play in 1984. And by the way, in 1984, $5,000 was worth like $20,000. So me just saying that casually, like with all the other like carefully planned query stuff, it's not that crazy. Not that, you know, like I've heard stories of famous actors who like stalked directors to get them to play the role. They like sent them, you know, like chased them down and like pinned them to the ground and did a monologue for them like that. And they like were hired from that. Okay. I heard those stories. So me just saying that casually, it's not that big of a deal. Okay. So I said that in the query. I was like, I'll bet you $5,000 it will sell, just like David Mamet did with his first play, or something. You know, somewhat, like, not nearly a sign that I'm insane at all. Just like a little, just like, you know how when you really want that one person, so you say something a little extra, and it shouldn't have to be a total deal breaker, given what's out there in the world and what I'm up against. So, anyway, I did say that. And yeah, so then I get this call from Paul Levine. And I don't answer it because my shift is about to start, so I let him leave a message. It's a Sunday. And he leaves a message and he's like, "Hi Joyce, this is Paul Levine. I received your query and I would like to talk to you. I'm currently traveling. I'm at a conference." He apparently does all these conferences, these writers' conferences, like how to sell your book and all this stuff. Assuming it was even the real Paul Levine who called me. So I start my shift, and I report to the offices behind the cafeteria, and there's this guy sitting back there, and he's like, "I hope your life is nothing but wonderful from here on out." Just, he says it randomly, almost like he was trying to engage in a social engineering component designed to make me think that this was going to be my big break and that I should like quit my job. Because for the 2 weeks starting the next day, I was actually staffed at the US Open, and I was really focused on saving as much money as I could for the next foreseeable year or two, because I needed to move out of my apartment of 5 bedrooms where I was very clearly getting spied on and weirdly psychologically harassed by my roommates, who were pretty clearly getting positioned by a landlord who was either working for Scientology or working for the interests of the Cardman and Kaplan family, or some ally of theirs, because of this dark humor memoir I was querying surrounding the Joseph Brooks rape trials. So I was basically living in a weird Scientology CIA-esque apartment of like 5 bedrooms that was literally engineered to psychologically just mess with me. You should read Stephen Kinzer's Poisoner in Chief. if you want to get a better idea of why I might be concerned that, maybe some intelligence agency is conveniently conducting some government experiments, now that I'm being fair gamed by Scientology anyway. But that's another story for another day. Yeah, as I'm going through the excitement of, oh, this agent called me, I'm also like, oh, they're probably trying to get me to quit my job so that I get stuck in this apartment and go insane and my life will be ruined or something. So it's weird. It's like simultaneous. It's like I can't help but suspend my disbelief that like something good is happening to me, but I'm also like, oh, I'm getting fair game by the church. Nah. Like it's like I'm watching a play of my own life and I'm the protagonist, and it's not healthy to do to the extent that I'm forced to do it. So this guy who's like in the office behind the, I think it was Hayden Hall, NYU cafeteria, he's like engaging in this weird social engineering thing to make me feel like it's a sign from the universe that, oh, wow, this must be my big break. I better quit my job. And so I get home after my shift, and I call Paul Levine, and he's like, basically what he says is, you should trim it by about 20,000 words, which is not outlandish for an agent to say about your book. And then he says, and also, ever since the James Frey A Million Little Pieces memoir scandal, no agents are accepting unknown memoirists. They're only taking memoirists who are already established authors or they're celebrities, because James Frey wrote a memoir about addiction and it turned out he just made shit up in it. And he said, so, because James Frey did that, you will have to pay to get your memoir legally vetted before an agent can sell it to a publisher. And he said, and there's only about 2 guys in Hollywood who do that, and I'm one of them. And, I can do it for you, or you can get another lawyer, he said, but it'll probably cost you about $5,000. And he said, because I'm also an entertainment lawyer, and his website shows he's an entertainment lawyer and an agent. And he says, like, he says, yeah. So, and I was like, well, first of all, one, immediate red flag. Arts Business 101, first day of acting school. No agent ever says you have to give me money first. They take their percent from your commission or your book advance or whatever. And the most any literary agent might take, I've heard from some, and even some think this is sketchy, is like postage costs. And most won't, because like now it's all digital. And most would front that themselves. So like, that's number one. Number two, I'm like, first of all, if James Frey's agent, and publisher failed to vet him, that's on them. I'm not paying that. No one is paying that. But James Frey and his agent and his publisher, not Now, not, oh, one guy fucked up, now some sleazy lawyer gets to scam every writer for $5,000 just because that one guy fucked up. Nope, that's on you. Maybe James Frey's agent had a crush on him and didn't do their due diligence because they were distracted. That's not anybody's problem. Okay, I don't even know what happened there. I never heard of James Frey before this Paul Levine character tried to use it to hustle me. And I was like, who's James Frey? And then I Googled this Million Little Pieces thing, and I was like, oh, well, that's on him. That's his problem. That doesn't reflect any other writer. If he did that, that means his agent and his publisher failed to legally vet him. I don't know why. Like, whatever. But maybe they thought, maybe they knew that it would eventually blow up and be really good publicity. Who knows? But that has no reflection on me. I've worked very hard to be as truthful and accurate as possible, and I do not have to pay that man's price for shit. In fact, he can pay $5,000 to Paul Levine on my behalf. So anyway, and I haven't read Million Little Pieces yet, but I intend to. I'll get it from the library. Whatever. Give me my book deal. Stop trying to bring James Frey into this or blame me for his shit. No offense. So anyway. So he's like, yeah, ever since James Frey did that, they just won't take any new memoirists. As if that's the first writer who's tried to hustle somebody. As if that's the first time anybody ever tried to hustle anyone. It's like, all writers and the writing and publishing business want 100% totally ethical. And then James Frey was literally like Adam and Eve in the garden. And now innocence is lost. And now all memoirists have to pay for their own vetting. Dude, that doesn't make sense. Because if you're a memoirist and you go to an agent and the agent sells your book to a publisher, then the publishers are going to we're going to use our lawyers to legally vet the book. And then the writers, if the writer says, no, I already paid $5,000 to get it legally vetted, here you go, it's done. Why would they trust that? It's like you did it yourself. No, the only way that a publisher can legally vet your book with any confidence is they do it themselves. If they need you to pay for it, which is shady and doesn't make any sense, they'll have to be like, they should trust your book enough to say, oh, well, we'll take that out of your royalty. And then when that happens and then you realize, oh, I got scammed, you can sue them years later. But the point is, why would they trust a writer who's like, don't worry, I legally vetted it myself. Don't worry. You don't need to. That doesn't make any sense. So that's already two sketchy things this Paul Levine dude is trying to convince me of. One, suddenly James Frey is the only scam artist in the business. Oh, yeah, so now I have to pay him $5,000. And two, that any publisher would see that as legitimate and decide they don't have to legally vet as well. I think he was saying you have to legally vet before they're even willing to legally vet you. But, it's already clearly a very psychologically gripping hustle that he's trying to narrate to me. Nevertheless, I really want it to be all true. But the fact that he says it's $5,000 oddly mirrors the $5,000 I offered to bet in a totally separate email to the agent that I'll call Bill that I was hoping would respond to me. And I'm like, it's almost as if this person on the phone telling me they're Paul Levine accessed my email to Bill and thinks I have $5,000 that he can hustle me out of. And I'm like, is a Scientology hacker like planting every fake website, you know, every time I Google an agent, and then like reading all my queries, and I'm not even sending queries to like actual agents half the time. It's like these fake websites, and then they're like using the separate emails I send to people to weave like a psychological web that like traps me. Like, that's what I'm thinking may have happened here with this agent Bill and this agent Paul, that I sent a query to Bill, and then somebody called me as Paul and tried to hustle me out of like the $5,000 that I mentioned to Bill. And when I talked to Paul Levine on the phone, his voice was very pleasant. He sounded very intelligent. He sounded not at all like what you would think any kind of scam artist would sound like. He kind of reminded me of David Mamet vocally. Like, not that I have too much familiarity with David Mamet. I don't know if they picked a voice scrambler that sounds like David Mamet, but that's what they could have done. They could have found a voice changer that duplicates David Mamet's voice from online and called me with David Mamet's voice. That's fucking psychotic. So I should have recorded these calls. I was talking on the phone. So when I was talking on the phone to Paul Levine, I was like, Paul, I was like, okay, like I could, I was like, I could see what I could do about the 20,000 words, no problem. Like, I'm totally down to package it, you know, however you want. I was like, I know it's a debut book, and like, you know, whatever, like, I'll do what you want, and then my next book I can be more indulgent if I want it to be longer. Like, maybe. But the Paul Levine on the phone, I think whoever called me as Paul Levine was using a voice scrambler that sounded like David Mamet, which is like, what the fuck Twilight Zone is this? Mirroring the $5,000 in the email. And basically, as I was trying to hunker down and save up money to move out of this literal, like, 5-bedroom CIA experiment that I'm living in, the goal was to scam me of, like, $5,000 and, like, who knows, maybe get me to, like, give up and kill myself. Not gonna happen. But, yeah, so I think that may have been what happened. And when the man saying they were Paul Levine called me with what may or may not have been a David Mamet voice changer, the dude, he was asking questions that seemed like, oh, maybe he's a private investigator, maybe he's like hired by the Brooks and Cardman family, maybe he's hired by Scientology. He's like, so everything in the book happened, right? Like, he did it like he was almost getting hired as a witness or something. I don't know. A witness to try to falsely incriminate me in any possible way they can. I think maybe this manuscript has been shopped around by people maybe suing me on behalf of Joseph Brooks, on behalf of Scientology, on behalf of the Cardman family. Maybe they want to build a case trying to claim any possible wrongdoing on my part at all. I think that's what's happening. Like, they're trying to, just because I cross paths with this man doing bad things, they're probably trying to find any way they can make any kind of legal claim against me. That's what they're doing. I think probably my manuscript is in the possession of lawyers that work for Scientology, that work for Joseph Brooks, that work for the Cardman family, and they're trying to paint a massive picture and like send me to jail for any possible thing they can find. I think that's definitely what's happening. I think maybe I got a phone call from literally someone using a David Mamet voice changer, and I really regret not recording that call. What a fucking loss. Okay. So, yeah, like, that is what is happening, and to this very moment, I'm constantly getting bothered by people hired to have conversations with me in this ongoing literal web of lies attempting to engulf me. So yeah, I talked to this Paul Levine dude on the phone, and so he tells me those things, and I'm like, okay, and I really want him to be a real agent who's all I have to do is, you know, give him my life savings, and then he'll get me a book deal. I'm like, wait, I'm like, so Paul, I was like, of course I didn't sound this confident on the phone because I'd literally been like basically doing nothing but hiding in my apartment from the pandemic and going out to work and writing my book, and I was probably like developing nearsightedness from only having like companions on Zoom and like in public always wearing a mask and like being like a weird cafeteria lady who was also secretly an alumni. That's just creepy for me. But I think I handled it really well. So like I'm like, oh, okay, Paul, so if I pay you $5,000 and I make the book 20,000 words shorter, do you think, like, could I sell it? And he was like, I was like, not that I have $5,000, but if I, you know, like, how could I, you know, I was like, would you get, like, do you think you'd be able to get me a book deal? And he's like, definitely, I think I could sell this. I was like, great. But then I hang up, I'm like, of course none of this is going to work out. Like, they definitely want me to give $5,000 to a scam artist and then, like, kill myself in this apartment filled with weird private investigators. So I send him an email. I sent Paul Levine an email because I'd initially contacted him by email query, and I write, hey, Paul, so wait, if you want me to pay you $5,000 for legal vetting, how about I was like, because I only contacted you in the capacity of an agent and not a entertainment lawyer, why don't you just, you know, seeing as you believe in my book so much that you could sell it, why don't you just, you know, take that $5,000 out of my book advance, you know, when you get that? Why don't you do the legal vetting, and then when you sell my book, which you're so sure you can do, just take the $5,000 out of that. Now, that would also be sketchy, but I was like, fuck it, I'll take that loss if he can actually sell my book. I was like, if you want to take an extra $5,000 out of my fee, then that, you know, that would be also sleazy, but I'll let them fuck me like that because whatever, I have nothing else. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what if this dude Paul Levine is literally trying to trick me? Well, Paul Levine, it probably wasn't even the real Paul Levine, unless Paul Levine also works as a fixer. Who knows? So I was like, oh my god, wait a minute. What if this dude Paul Levine, I was like, first of all, this writer doing their own legal vetting thing doesn't even make sense, but I'm just trying to delude myself that it does because I want the book deal so bad. And then I'm like, okay, I was like, wait, what if Paul Levine's trying to trick me into paying him $5,000 to legally vet the book, and the legal vetting he performs basically entails getting me to tell him the real names of the people in my book whose names that I changed, so that he can call them individually and just, like, fuck up my life and make them mad at me and then, like, leave. Like, maybe that's what he's trying to do. Maybe he's a fixer and he's trying to get me to, like, thoroughly tell him, oh, this is this person's real life name. Why don't you just call them and ask them if this insulting anecdote I describe about them really happened? Like, what, you know, like, so basically, it's like, what if he's not only trying to steal $5,000 so that I have no ability to move out of, like, the house of spies that I'm living in, but then he wants to call every single person who is even mentioned in the book and say, oh, I just want to make sure, did this anecdote that Joyce Miller describes where you act like a douchebag to her, did this happen? And then just that, they just, like, basically, he just in every way ruins my life, and then I'm stuck in this apartment and all my life savings are gone. I think that may have been what had happened, or that may have been the goal. I don't even know if it was the real Paul Levine calling me, but even the real Paul Levine looked sketchy online. And literally, this was, so I stayed hooked on the hope, but I still kept my head down and focused on saving money and moving. And I was like, Joyce, do not believe this scam artist. I was like, there has to be another agent who will like your book. I was like, if he's a legitimate agent, then there's going to be another more legitimate agent who likes your book. And it's okay to let this opportunity go, because he's clearly timing the phone call to ruin your plans to move out of the apartment where people are getting paid to spy on you. So I was like, but literally the whole time I had to really pep talk myself into feeling like, into not falling for this dude's scam. I even said to myself, like, hey, maybe I could give him $5,000. And like, yeah, even if I lose it, ultimately, I would still, like, I would learn. And it, like, that is so, I would learn that it was a scam. Like, and that, like, that kind of create, like, very self-destructive thinking. And also, the thinking to which somebody who's been in a high control group that requires a lot of monetary contribution would be prone. It's just it's sad that, between the summer of 2021 and basically up until like just maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I was still saying like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have, let Paul Levine get away, like, that's sad. I've been literally, now it's like almost, it's like 2.5 years later, and I'm still saying, oh darn, I lost that chance I had with Paul Levine, right? But the thing that made me stop saying that to myself is just a few months ago online, I was reading a writer's message board, still Googling about Paul Levine, going, uh-oh, he's sold that, like, he has a list of books he sold, and I was like, uh-oh, that's a legitimate sale, like, maybe I did fuck up by not listening to him, right? But then I saw this one website of this woman writing a post in a writer's forum, and she was like, oh, this guy Paul Levine, like, what's his deal? And then somebody else farther down was like, oh, Paul Levine, like, first, like, he said he needed like $100 for this. Then a few months later, it was like $200. Then a few months later, it was $300, and then $400, and then $500. And then, like, she was like, and ultimately he scammed me out of like $7,000 or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, like, wow. And I'm like, this guy's out there just scamming writers. Like, you could be making money by getting a good book and selling it once in a while. Like, you're putting, at this point, you're putting more effort into scamming people, and like, you're gonna get arrested any day now. Like, you should have, like, you're spending way more effort scamming people than you could be by reading, a bunch of not so great manuscripts, or great manuscripts but like that don't sell. And then once in a while you could sell something, and like, you would be putting in less effort and having a more enjoyable job than just like scamming people. That's crazy. But then I was like, what if Paul Levine is not a scam artist? Maybe he's just like a kind of not so great agent, but like, maybe he just, because I remember on one of his list of clients was an L. Ron Hubbard's writers contest. Like, there's a Writers of the Future contest that's not, it's like it's L. Ron Hubbard's Writers of the Future contest. And maybe the real Paul Levine is not bad, not good, just like kind of an agent who just hasn't hit much luck yet or something. Maybe he's just kind of shady. And maybe Paul Levine, the real life Paul Levine, said something about the one writer on his list who won the Writers of the Future contest, like maybe he said one bad thing about L. Ron Hubbard, and now he's getting fair gamed, and the fact that like maybe the operative hired to fair game Paul Levine used it to fair game me, like maybe they play fair game targets against each other. In fact, they probably do. They probably have a really elaborate system, but I don't want to, play devil's advocate on Paul Levine's behalf. But I'm trying to figure out how this happened. What are how this theater of the internet took place in this particular instance. So, I mean, it's literally like, if this is all Scientology doing this, it's like, they've got like their own CIA. And I have to wonder, like, how many other religions have this going on? And maybe a lot of religions do something like this, but Scientology's gotten so extreme that all the religions are like, dude, you're gonna make us look bad, and then none of us will be allowed to use spies or something, you know what I mean? But this is what I read that, like, China and, like, Iran do to, like, their defectors, like, when they follow them to the US, except, like, this is so much money and so much effort being pinpoint focused on, like, a very small amount of people who've done almost nothing wrong most of the time. And not even anything threatening. Like, Scientology, by doing this, if it's just them, I'm just, like, I can't wrap my head around this as just Scientology, because it's so elaborate, and it seems like I've done something so wrong that I'm like, this has to be a government experiment. It can't just be the Church of Scientology. Like, that's crazy. Like, I think maybe a much more subtle, neutral version of this was going on when I simply just, like, drifted away from the church, as a young person. And then it's almost like they do it. It's like they manufacture defectors, and almost the opposition becomes like a kind of publicity for them, because they can like manipulate the public image of their defectors and make people gravitate towards Scientology by showing, oh, look, our defectors are this and this and terrible, but, like, look at our movie stars, they're doing this and this and this. And so the way they're able to manipulate their defectors becomes kind of a publicity machine. But even as I'm saying these things, I feel guilty for saying anything bad about the church, which is fascinating, and probably why I'm susceptible to, like, this weird shit, like, by Paul Levine calling me with a weird David Mamet voice scrambler. I don't even know. Can you sue someone for pretending to be a person and then having that pretend version of a person use a David Mamet voice scrambler? I'm not sure. Anyway, these are the big questions we need to ask. So never stop asking questions, unless you think it'll put you in danger, which I never knew it would. And now look at me, I'm screwed. So, alright, I'm just going to turn the video off. Maybe this fair game thing can be like, oh, I could write another book. Like, at least you know that there's that in the works.